is happening, guys? Welcome back to The Global Citizen. If you're new to the channel, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. And for those of you that are returning, welcome back, guys. So today's video is a quick video that I thought I'd make. I thought I'd just go through some of the reasons why I have decided to leave Australia and move to Canada. So I've got my phone here, so I've got a list of stuff that I've listed down and we'll go through them one by one. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. So I've lived here in Australia for 8 and a bit years. So I came here in 2014. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. So I've lived in Perth, Western Australia for about 8.5 years. This is based off of my experience. Obviously your experience may vary for obvious reasons, but this is what I've witnessed and what I've had to endure, and obviously everyone's experience is going to be different for obvious reasons. So please do bear that in mind before you start butchering me in the comments. So without any further ado, let's get right into it, guys. So number one is cost of housing. So as mentioned before, I live in Perth, Western Australia. And well, look, I haven't lived in any other state within Australia, but simply put, the housing market in Australia is mental. The housing market here in Western Australia is just ridiculous. To put that into perspective, I currently live in a 3-bedroomed house in a very middle-class-ish neighborhood, safe, far away from the city. So I live about 30 kilometers away from the CBD, Perth CBD, and I pay $1,700 a month. When I first moved in here last year in February, just to give a bit of context, I live in a townhouse complex, so we've got about 12 or so units that are pretty much identical. So when I first moved in here in February last year, the house across mine was on sale, up for sale. The house sold for mid 300s. For those of you that don't know what that means it sold for about 350,000 Australian dollars. Fast forward to this year, and this is now 2022, and around March, I believe, the house at the very beginning of the street, so basically the first house on the lot, sold for about 430,000 Australian dollars. And to put that into perspective, a very similar house, if not identical house, had sold for pretty much about 70 or 80 grand less a year prior to that. So housing market in Australia is crazy. Now, of course, the housing market in Canada is no different, and housing there is also very expensive. But if we were to compare apples to apples, because I intend to migrate to Alberta, more specifically Calgary, if I compare Calgary to Perth, property prices in Calgary are much lower than here. So the next thing is limited job opportunities. So I came out here to study as a student, and I studied petroleum engineering. I finished in 2019, and for a whole year, so basically from the month of August in 2019 all the way until November 2020, I could not find a job. Look, COVID might play a factor into this, perhaps, but even during the period that I was studying, it was really difficult for me to get any internships, really difficult for me to just get any jobs, really. That's one of those things that has been a constant since I've come out here to Australia. I have a lot of friends that are in similar situations that came out here to study that are unable to find work. And as a matter of fact, I lived in this very house with my sister, who has now actually left Australia. So her degree was Bachelor of Commerce, I believe, accounting and banking. And she actually wasn't able to find a job for nearly 2 years. So she just left last month. So she's recently just cut her ties with Australia and decided to try something different. So she's moving to Toronto, I believe, in a couple of days. We'll see how that goes. But in general, job opportunities here are scarce. And I feel like if you're an immigrant, it just gets a lot harder to find work. And when I say work, guys, I'm not even talking about minimum wage jobs or anything like that. I'm talking about white collar jobs. So we're talking about, people that are educated. You've got your degree, and in some cases you've actually got that experience, and it's just really hard to break into these industries. I mean, mind you, I am working in the mining industry now, And look, once you sort of get into the industry, you break into it, it gets a lot easier. Ultimately, I feel like job opportunities here are limited, and the reason why I feel like job opportunities are better in Canada is because I actually have more than one colleague that has actually lived here in Australia, moved to Canada, and they're all working now, and they actually say the same thing. So they feel like there are more opportunities in Canada. Now, of course, your mileage will vary depending on who you are and what sort of industry you're in, but that's just my opinion. Number 3 is a crazy one, guys. So basically, Australia is really isolated. And I know it's one of those things that at first glance might seem like, look, it's not that big of a deal. But trust me, guys, it plays a huge role. Because I live in Perth right now, and there's this saying that we have here. I'm not sure how true this is, but obviously everything has a little bit of truth into it, right? So basically, they call Perth the most isolated city in the entire world. The problem with that is that flights in and out of here are, number 1, very limited and very scarce, and number 2, extremely expensive. I kid you not, guys, interstate flights here are super expensive, let alone international flights. And it's always one of those strange things where it's like, I'm from Zimbabwe, as mentioned before, so whenever I go home for the holidays, like I look at those ticket prices and they're just crazy, like crazy figures, like, $2,000, sometimes $3,000 return, right? And I put that into context, and you look at a flight from Zimbabwe or South Africa, in the region, to Los Angeles, and even though that distance might be way longer than the journey here to Perth, and those flights will literally be like half the price, probably even less. Look, Australia is super isolated, and that obviously comes with its own advantages, but I feel like it comes with a lot more disadvantages. Moving on, so number 4, proximity to the United States. This one is an important one for me, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So basically, being so isolated, we don't really have any massive sort of like geographically noteworthy and socially friendly countries, if that makes sense. Because the nearest thing that we have here is pretty much Asia, which of course Asia, your mileage will vary with countries that are socially aware and that sort of thing. Yes, you do have Bali and Indonesia and all those touristy sort of like places. I feel like at the same time, if you put that into contrast and you look at a country like Canada, you've got literally a massive border with the United States. The reason why that's important, why the proximity to the United States is important for me, is because the United States is the largest market in the world. So what that means is that in general, I will be able to get products cheaper in the United States. I will have greater access to said products and probably even more access to more brands than I have here. So obviously Australia being so isolated, it's also a very small country with a very small market. So basically what that means is just that the demand here for goods and products is a lot less than it is in North America. Everyone knows that. But what that also means is that because the demand is so low, it means that the supply is low. And in a lot of those cases, it actually means that some of these products don't even exist here. You have no idea, guys, how many times I've wanted certain products that I've seen online. It could be anything. Prime example of this is just shoes. So for example, I'm a sneakerhead. I buy a lot of kicks, a lot of Jordans, that sort of thing. But when it comes to those sort of specialty kicks, you can never find them in Australia. Like I kid you not, every single pair of Jordans that I have, or every single sort of like niche type of shoe that I've bought, you're not gonna find it in Australia. Or if you do, the price is just gonna be so ridiculous that no one's gonna want to buy it. And then on the other hand, you look at the US market and it's literally just way more options, way more availability. Proximity to the US for me is a huge one. And look, just so I'm a freelance photographer as well, as a hobbyist-ish. So I have to buy a lot of camera equipment. It's just my thing. And a lot of tech stuff. And trust me, guys, being here for 9 or so years has been an absolute nightmare because these products are very expensive in Australia, and a lot of the times they just aren't available. And if they are available, you usually find that they're available first in the United States, and then there's a huge wait between products being launched and being released on the North American / European market before it actually sort of comes out here to Australia. Fifth thing is feeling welcome. So as mentioned before, I came out here as an international student. So I came here in the year 2014, did my bachelor's degree, and finished in 2019. So the weird thing is that throughout my entire time at university or college, I never really felt unwelcome. But I feel like that was because, when you're at uni, you sort of operate in a bubble. And that bubble is just, you and your friends, you hang out every weekend, you go to parties, you go to events, same social group of people, and you don't really sort of get out there, meet that many new people in the real world, if that makes sense. So your life just sort of revolves around, okay, going to class, you and your friends, what are they doing, what party is going on, and that's it. So I never really felt like that. However, as soon as I graduated in 2019, I kid you not, guys, every single day, I am reminded every single day or every other day of the fact that I am an immigrant here and I am not Australian. I don't know how or why that is, but there's just a certain body language that I get and a certain vibe that I get from Australians that isn't particularly welcoming. And look, the immigration programs say it all, because it is becoming extremely, extremely difficult to get, number one, permanent residency in Australia. There are a lot of students that are coming out here as visitors, as temporary residents, and a lot of them are actually studying in Australia. So they're spending a lot of tuition fees here in Australia, only to find out at the end of it that, one, limited opportunities, very hard to find a job. And then two, even if you do find that job, it is very difficult to actually get permanent residency here. I don't care what anyone says, guys. I've been here for 9 years. It is very difficult, especially as an immigrant. It is ridiculous. I kid you not. You have no idea how many other students I know that have basically quit Australia or have been forced to quit Australia simply because they cannot get a job, which would then sort of allow them to get permanent residency, or if they do find the job, they cannot get the right kind of job, which would then allow them to get permanent residency. It's absolutely nuts. And actually, the reason why my sister did leave is that her graduate visa, which is a visa that you get after you graduate, it's about 2 years long, allows you to find work, was actually coming to an end. So in other words, she got her graduate visa, she had 2 years to look for a job, and in those 2 years, she looked for a job and couldn't find one. 2 years, guys. She spent 2 years job hunting. And finally, guys, the last one on the list for me, number 6, we have picturesque landscapes and natural beauty. For those of you that don't know, Australia is massive, and Australia is actually a continent. For such a big country, the country has a very low population. Furthermore, if you look at how Australia is structured, basically all that population is basically concentrated on all the coastal cities around the country. What that means is that in the middle of Australia, you have this big gaping hole that is called the Australian outback. Desert-like landscape, lots of rocks, lots of dryness, lots of heat, lots of very deadly animals. So they've got, I think, the 12th deadliest animals in the world or something like that in the Australian outback. Basically, nobody lives there. You've got a few sort of like towns and stuff going on there, but the general consensus is that the populations live on the coastal cities. And in contrast, if you now look at Canada, Canada has some of the most amazing natural landscapes literally in the world. I haven't even been there, but just from the stuff that I've seen, amazing landscapes in Canada. And it seems like a lot of these landscapes are actually pretty well spread out. And I'll give you a few examples of this. So for example, you've got on the east coast of Canada, you've got stuff like Niagara Falls. And then, you go further west to Alberta, you've got the Canadian Rockies, and then move on further west to British Columbia, and you got amazing ski resorts in places like Whistler and stuff like that. What I like about this is just the fact that it's it's spread out throughout the whole country. You've basically got provinces, you've got cities, and big cities too. It's not just tiny cities or anything like that. You've got a relatively good distribution of population throughout the whole country, meaning that stuff like major road trips are really, really amazing, and it's really something to do because you'll see a lot. It'll be very eventful. There'll be a lot of stuff that is actually noteworthy that you'll see. Whereas here in Australia, so I've lived in Western Australia for pretty much 9 years, and I've actually traveled a lot within the state of Western Australia. It's actually a pretty big state. Really, if you're in Perth and you drive, let's say down south to Bunbury, Margaret River, look, there's a bit of farming. Majority of the drive uneventful. You drive up north to Kununurra near the Northern Territory border, same thing. It's just desert, kangaroos, desert, nothing. That plays a huge factor because, as mentioned before, I am a freelance and hobbyist photographer. For me, it is actually a dream to photograph some of those natural landscapes in Canada. So places like Banff in Alberta, places like Lake Louise, and there's just so many places that I've literally looked at photographs and thought, I pray and wish that I can photograph this one day. So those are the 6 reasons, guys. And look, those are my personal reasons. Obviously, other people's reasons will be different and your mileage will vary because everyone is different. Everyone studied stuff that's different. But when it came to me, after having been here for almost 9 years, it just came down to those 6 major things. Those are like disadvantages of Australia, which are positives of Canada. And that's why it was such an easy decision for me to make. So for stuff like feeling welcome, I mean, the Australian immigration system right now is just ridiculous. It's so tight. It doesn't really give off the impression that they want many immigrants. And then you look at Canada and it's the complete opposite. Canada is actually crying out for immigrants, and they're very happy and welcoming to immigrants, and they're basically just pleading their case to the whole entire world, basically letting them know that, look, if you're an immigrant and you've got skills and you're a good Samaritan and you want to pay your taxes and you want to be a part of the Canadian story, then by all means come here because we'll welcome you with wide arms. And of course, as mentioned before, guys, this is just my experience, and of course your experience or somebody else's experience will vary and it might not be the exact same, but I obviously have to tell my story, and ultimately these are the reasons why I have decided to leave Australia for Canada. Thank you guys for watching, if you made it this far into the video. And remember, guys, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you are. I'll be posting the rest of the express entry journey in my upcoming videos. We are now getting close to some pretty definitive moments within that process, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, guys, I am the Global Citizen. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.